Pressbox Podcast time once again. This is Joseph. Ralph will be joining me shortly. This is our quarterfinals matchup round of our Ultimate Super Bowl Champions bracket, where we're looking to crown the Ultimate Super Bowl Champion of all time, starting in 1966 with the Packers, running up through the Chiefs here. So, in our first episode, we broke down the first round matchups, led us to this quarterfinal round, which we'll get into today. And without further ado, let's get into the episode.
Okay, we're back on the Pressbox Podcast, and as you know, we are in the second round, the quarterfinal round of our Super Bowl Champions bracket, where we're finding the greatest Super Bowl champion in the Super Bowl era from Super Bowl I in 1966 season all the way to the present Super Bowl that was just concluded between the Kansas City Chiefs and the San Francisco 49ers. As I said, we're in the quarterfinal bracket. We have 4 teams left on each side from the NFC and 4 Super Bowl champions from the AFC. Once again, to let you know how we did this, as similar to how we did the baseball bracket, the World Series champion, Joseph, my co-host, myself, and our producer Nathan each put together a list of 8 teams in the AFC and 8 teams from the NFC. We did that separately. We compared our lists. If we all 3 agreed on a team, then that team was in. If just 2 of us agreed on it, pretty much they were in. We discussed it a little bit. But if we each had different teams that we only voted for, then we had a discussion from there on out. Once we arrived at our 8 teams, we seeded them based on winning percentage, and then if the winning percentages were tied, we looked at offensive and defensive ranks and made our assessment that way. So we had our first round of the Super Bowl that was concluded just a few days ago. You probably heard that podcast. We are now in the quarterfinals. We have the AFC bracket. We have the number 1 seed 1972 Miami Dolphins. Will take on the number 4 seed, the 2004 New England Patriots. And in the bottom half of the bracket, the number 3 seeds, 1978 Pittsburgh Steelers, taking on the number 2 seed, 1976 Oakland Raiders. So all the top seeds came through on the AFC side. On the NFC side, we have the number 1 seed Chicago Bears from 1985, taking on the number 4 seed, the 1986 New York Giants. Bottom half of the bracket, the number 3 seed, the 1989 San Francisco 49ers, taking on the only upset winner to come through the first round, and that was the 7th seeded 1996 Green Bay Packers. So Nathan, you want to get us set for our first matchup today?
Yeah, we'll start with the 85 Bears against the 86 Giants matchup. The 85 Bears were 15-1, first in the NFC Central Division, coached by Mike Ditka. They beat the Giants in the divisional round of the playoffs. They beat the LA Rams in the conference championship. Shut out both of those teams, and they beat the Patriots 46-10 in the Super Bowl. And then we have the 86 Giants were 14-2, first in the NFC East, coached by Bill Parcells. They beat the 49ers in the divisional round, shut out the Redskins in the conference championship, and they beat the Broncos 39-20 in the Super Bowl.
Okay, Joseph, I'm going to try real hard to keep my personal opinions out of this, since I'm a big New York Giants fan, as you know and everybody knows. So I'm going to let you kick it off here, and I'll kind of play off that.
Okay, all right. This is, I think, one of the first matchups that these same teams could have essentially played each other.
And they did in the 85, yeah.
Right. So, just 1 year apart, and you said 85 who won? That was the
Bears won that one. They shut out the Giants.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, take that for what you will there. Starting with the coaching matchups here, I give the edge to Bill Parcells. We talked about Ditka a little bit in the last episode. Parcells is a better coach. Let's face
No
it.
question. No question.
So we give the coaching nod to the Giants there.
This game would be in Chicago, though, which shouldn't matter much because the Giants played a windy stadium.
Right, it could be similar weather, yeah. First of all, I just want to just think about the 2 teams' best players. You got Walter Payton,
right,
and you got Lawrence Taylor,
right.
Tough to answer on either side there for the opponents to answer either of those guys there on either side. When you take it a step further, you probably answer this better than me, but I think Phil Simms is probably a little better than Jim McMahon.
He is.
So I'll give the edge to him there. This is a pretty close matchup.
This is a really tough matchup. I know what you're going through. I was looking at these stats, and they're so equal in so many things. Take for example the kicking game. The Bears have a slight edge in field goal kicker. Their field goal kicker was Kevin Butler. Kevin Butler was pretty much on point. He was 31 of 37 in field goals. That's 84%. He made 51 of 51 extra points. All right. And then you look at their punter was Maury Buford. Not exactly a big name, but he did average 42 yards per punt. So that's the Bears. If you look at the Giants, their punter probably had the edge. Their punter was Sean Landeta. Sean Landeta was averaged about 45 yards per punt, so a little bit better than the Bears. But then when you look at their field goal kicker, the Giants had Raul Allegre. He was 33 of 33 for extra points, but he was only 75% on his field goals. So if the game came down to a field goal, you would have to say Kevin Butler probably, you'd feel more confident with him kicking it than you would Raul Allegre. Okay? I mean, if you look at their playoff performances, I mean, I have to give the Giants a little bit of an edge there because they did beat the San Francisco 49ers, who were coming off having won the Super Bowl a couple years earlier, and they basically destroyed that team 49-3 in New York, and then shut out a very good Washington Redskins team who had defeated those same Bears 1 week earlier in the divisional round, and they shut them out. You look at the 85 Bears and their playoff performance. While they did win both of their playoff games via shutout, they did beat the Giants, and then they beat the Rams, who really should have been in that game. The Rams were an upset winner to get in that game and really had no quarterback. In fact, their quarterback, his name escapes me right now, but he was a guy that had been in the Canadian Football League the year before and ended up quarterbacking the Rams.
The 86 Rams?
The 85 Rams.
Okay.
Yeah, his name, for some reason, I can't think of his name.
The quarterback, you said?
Quarterback, yeah. He wore number 5.
Dieter Brock.
Dieter Brock, yeah. Dieter Brock, who had come from the Canadian, thank you, Nathan, came from the Canadian League. So I give the Giants a little bit of an edge in the playoffs as to the teams that they won and some of the games that they won. So then you have to look at stats. I mean, if you look at stats, I mean, the Bears were overall 7th on offense and number 1 on defense. The Giants were overall 10th on offense and number 2 on defense. So a little bit of an edge there. As you said, the Bears have Walter Payton. The Giants had Joe Morris.
Well, yeah, I was going to say to that point there. I mean, obviously Walter Payton's a better running back than Joe Morris.
Yes.
But if you look at season for season, the seasons are very comparable
Yes.
here. Payton had 1,551 yards and 9 touchdowns.
Right.
And in the 86 season for the Giants, Morris had 15, 16, and 14 touchdowns.
Right.
So, pretty similar there
yeah.
for those 2 years. And when you add that to the fact that I'd give the edge to the Giants in receiving because Walter Payton led the Bears in receptions in 85.
Yes.
So they didn't have much of a passing game, whereas the Giants, Joe Morris did have, he did have 21 receptions, but that ranked, I think, 4th or 5th. You had Bavaro with 66.
Yeah, Tony Galbraith had 33.
Yeah.
Bobby Johnson had 31.
Stacey Robinson 29.
Yeah.
So I think Phil Simms and the Giants receivers pose a little more of a threat than the Bears.
Yes.
Basically, if you hone in on Walter Payton, you've taken the running game and the receiving game out a little bit. And as we all know, the Giants' defense coordinator was Bill Belichick.
Yes,
so
it was.
If he would have found a way to take Walter Payton out of the game some way, I think.
Yeah. And the Giants, I mean, you have to remember another thing. The Giants, we keep harping on Lawrence Taylor, which obviously is a great guy to harp on, but they had some really good players. I mean, they had Leonard Marshall, who was one of their defensive ends. They had George Martin, who was a very good defensive end. Their corners were Perry Williams and Mark Collins. Their strong safety was Kenny Hill. Their free safety was Terry Kennard. They had 3, as I said last week, 3 linebackers in Harry Carson, Carl Banks, and Lawrence Taylor that were probably one of the best units ever, whereas the Bears really, they had Singletary in the middle, and they had 2 other pretty good linebackers, but Singletary was kind of the guy there. I think overall, if you look at just players, maybe Hall of Fame players, I think the Giants had probably a few more than the Bears did. And that Bears defense was really pretty good. But then again, as you said, with Bill Belichick for the Giants, I see them pretty much holding the Bears in check offensively, and I see the Giants being able to maybe, with Bavaro, being able to squeeze out enough running, successful running plays to maybe shorten the game a little bit and win it towards the end.
Yeah, Giants defense might be a little underrated, just especially when you compare them to the Bears. I mean, in the 2 playoff games, the Giants gave up 3 points and 0 points,
right,
and the Bears gave up 0 and 0.
Right.
But in the Super Bowl, the Patriots,
they should have. They really should have been.
They weren't. Yeah, they weren't anything special.
No, they weren't.
And then you have the Giants had to go up against John Elway's Broncos.
Right.
John Elway, one of the greatest quarterbacks of all time. Held them to 20 points. And they put up 39. So the offense was able to get it done. With that. So I feel like that's kind of how this matchup might play out. Maybe I think the Giants' offense, as we talked about, gets enough done, and their defense holds up against the Bears' offense, which is a little bit weaker overall, I think.
And you made a good point about the Super Bowl. They beat the Broncos 39-20. The Broncos were ahead 10-9 at the half. So the Giants outscored them 30-10 in the second half. So that running game and Bavaro catching the ball started to wear down on the Broncos. And the key part of that game was the Broncos had a 1st and goal from the 3, and I'll never forget. 1st and goal from the 3. They ran the ball 3 times. Each of the Giant linebackers made plays. Taylor, Banks, Carson forced them into a field goal attempt that they missed, and that sent the game into halftime. And of course, the Giants took that momentum and went on to win. So, trying to put my love of the Giants out of it, and but so we're talking about, I still see the Giants winning this game.
I do too. I don't really have any horse in the race, so to speak. So I agree also. So I think, what do you think of score-wise?
Personally, I think the score in this game is probably going to be like maybe 10-3.
10-3. I was thinking a little bit more higher scoring than that.
Okay, what were you thinking?
24-14.
It's hard for me. I don't see I see the Giants scoring a couple touchdowns maybe. I don't see him scoring 3, but maybe I see him getting 1 field goal. So maybe 17-7 or 17-6, something like that. Maybe
we'll be in the middle there. Yeah, of course the score is not the most.
It doesn't.
We have the Giants moving on. So, but yeah, that's fine.
All right, let's call it 17-6 New York Giants, and I will fill in the bracket here real quick. Nathan, would you have something that I could possibly write on? Thank you. Moving parts here. So, in our first matchup today, we have the 1986 New York Giants advancing. And I'll write the scores in here. 17-6. All right. Nathan, our second game.
I would just say after talking about that game, it's interesting. You always hear about the 85 Bears as one of the best teams of all time, one of the best teams from the 80s. I don't hear much about the 86 Giants, but after hearing you all talk and thinking about it more, they're probably a better team. But you never hear, and they only lost 1 more regular season game.
That's correct.
So I don't know why you always hear about the 85 Bears, but
that's correct.
Because they didn't have a Super Bowl shuffle dance.
Yeah,
that's probably why.
And really,
they didn't have Walter Payton.
And really, if you look a little bit deeper, the Bears, that was the first year the Bears unveiled the 46 defense, which is used quite a bit today. The league wasn't ready for that, but then the next year, when the Bears should have been just as strong, they got beat in the first round by the Redskins, and then the following year didn't do much at all. So that one defensive shift, or that one new wrinkle, kind of helped the Bears overtake the league a little bit. You know what I mean? And then so I really don't think the Bears, as much as I think they were a great football team, I don't think they were as special as the Giants, because the Giants made the playoffs in 84, 85, won the Super Bowl in 86, made the playoffs again in 87, or at least 88, and then won the Super Bowl again in 89. So I agree. Giants 17-6 in that one. So, Nathan, let's look at our next matchup.
Yeah. We have the 3 seed 89 49ers against the 7 seed 96 Packers. The 89 49ers were 14-2. First in the NFC West, coached by George Seifert. Beat the Vikings in the divisional round, the LA Rams in the conference championship, and they beat the Broncos 55-10 in the Super Bowl. Mm-hmm. And the 96 Packers went 13-3, first in the NFC Central, coached by Mike Holmgren. Beat the 49ers in the divisional round, beat the Panthers in the conference championship, and they beat the Patriots 35-21 in the Super Bowl.
Okay. All right. I guess I'll kick this one off. I mean, this is a really difficult matchup as well. At first glance, I lean a little bit towards the 49ers, and the reason I do that is they were the defending Super Bowl champions in 88, and they came back and did win the Super Bowl again. If you look at the stats, though, the 49ers the 49ers, or excuse me, the Packers were 5th overall in total offense and 1st overall in total defense. And then if you look at the 89 49ers, they were very similar. They were 1st overall in total offense, but 4th overall in total defense. So the matchups are really close in this game. I mean, with these two teams. You look at the coaching matchups, you got Mike Holmgren with the Packers against George Seifert, right?
Yeah, tough game for Mike Holmgren, the offensive coordinator for the 49ers and 89 Niners and the head coach of the 96 Packers.
Right, exactly. Right, that'll be a tough game for him, no question about that. So that kind of leads you a little bit to look at matchup or look at players, you know, and it's hard for Joe Montana against Brett Favre. I mean, Brett Favre is a great quarterback, Hall of Fame quarterback, but I still don't put him in the same class as Joe Montana as far as pure quarterbacks go. And then you look at receivers. I mean, look at just receiving it for the 49ers. You know, Jerry Rice. I mean, Jerry Rice had 82 receptions. John Taylor had 60 receptions. Rathman had 73 coming out of the backfield. Roger Craig had 49 coming out of the backfield. I mean, this was a team that could that could beat you in so many ways with the passing game. Then you look at the Packers receiving. The Packers they spread the ball around quite a bit. I mean, Antonio Freeman was their leading receiver with 56, but they had lots of guys. Edgar Bennett 31, Dorsey Levens 31 out of the backfield, William Henderson 27, Robert Brooks had 23 catches at wide receiver. Keith Jackson, the tight end, had 40, and then of course Mark Chmura was their tight end. He had 28. So they spread the ball around quite a bit, just like the 49ers did. So again, a fairly even matchup there.
Yeah. As far as the quarterbacks go, Favre is probably my favorite quarterback of all time. And I think that it's as far as talent and making things happen, and I think he was a little better than Montana in that aspect, but he was also prone to make a mistake.
Right.
As we saw in the Vikings NFC Championship game where he threw the interception. So, and treating this matchup like a one-game playoff, which is what it is in a bracket, you know, you got to feel confident Montana is not going to make mistakes.
Right.
If I'm not mistaken, he never threw an interception in the Super Bowl, right?
Never did. No.
Okay.
Never did.
And went 4-0 in those games. So you just feel more comfortable. And if I had to win a game, I'd pick Montana over Favre, I think.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I mean, I agree with that. And then, and if you look at the defense, I mean, look at the 49er defense. I mean, they had Charles Haley, they had Bill Romanowski, they had Matt Millen. Those were some of their linebackers. Pierce Holt and Kevin Fagan, not really big names, but I remember watching those guys. They were pretty strong defensive ends. And then you look at their secondary. I mean, you know, it's hard to go against guys like Ronnie Lott at free safety, Chet Brooks at strong safety. Their cornerbacks, you know, Donnie Griffin was a really good cornerback. So, you know, they had some really good defensive players. Danny Stubbs was one of their defensive ends. Just a pretty solid. Eric Wright. I mean, he was kind of towards the end of his career, but he was a really good defensive back as well. So defensively, they had some really good players. And you look at the Packers. I mean, their defensive key was Reggie White. I mean, that was the guy that kind of like a Lawrence Taylor. I mean, he was hard to block. You know, they had Sean Jones at defensive end. They had George Coons, not a big name at linebacker. Brian Williams, not a big name at linebacker. Wayne Simmons, not a big name at linebacker. You know, Eugene Robinson, who went on to play for the Falcons a couple years after that, was at free safety, so he was not a bad player. Leroy Butler, a very good player at strong safety. So, again, you know, the matchups, aside from Reggie White, matchups pretty equal.
Yeah. I think Reggie White, you know, 49ers don't have a defensive player that can make that kind of impact like they have, like the Packers have. But
right.
And again, the 49ers have Jerry Rice, who arguably the greatest football player of all time as his receiver.
Right.
So you have him and John Taylor with a nice 1-2 receiving combo.
Right.
You got Tom Rathman, the fullback, who that year had 73 catches.
Right.
Roger Craig, who once was a member of the 1,000-yard receiving and rushing club in the same season.
Correct.
George Seifert is the head coach, but in Bill Walsh's offense, basically.
Right.
You know, with Montana, I just don't see how you stop them in this scenario, especially a Packers defense that is a good defense, but it doesn't have the big-time names that other defenses. They weren't a steel curtain defense. They weren't a purple people eaters or Ravens, things like that. So I give the edge to the 49ers based on all those aspects, and I think they probably pull this one out.
I think so too. I think it'll be a close game early on and maybe through 3 quarters, but it's really hard to pick against the trio of Joe Montana, Jerry Rice, John Taylor, and then when you look at Rathman coming out of the backfield along with Roger Craig, who rushed for over 1,000 yards that year.
And the defense who held John Elway's Broncos to 10 points in the Super Bowl.
Correct.
Hall of Fame quarterback. Patriots offense in '96 wasn't quite that prolific, I don't think.
No, they weren't. Let's look at the kicking game real quick. The San Francisco kicker was Mike Hofer. He was 80% on his field goals. He was 49 of 51 on extra points. Barry Helton was their punter. He averaged about 40 yards per punt. And then you look at the 1996 Green Bay Packers. You look at their kicking game. Chris Jackie was their field goal kicker. He was only 77% on his field goals. He missed 2 extra points. He was 51 of 53. Craig Hendrick was their punter. He averaged 42 yards a punt. So, nothing there that stands out. Maybe the 49ers kicker might be a little bit better, but the 49ers offense was so prolific that they really never had to rely on their kicker. And then I guess if you kind of look at their games over the year, which really probably is not a good way to look at it, but if you look at the Packers, they really didn't have a lot of close games. I mean, they did lose 3 games, but if you look at their wins, they had a couple close games here and there. The 49ers was a close game. They did play the 49ers, beat them by 3, beat the Buccaneers by 6. So they did have some close games, the Packers. Whereas if you look at the '89 49ers, you look at their performance, they only lost 2 games. They lost to the Rams by 1 early on in the season. They lost to the Packers by 4 later in the season. But most of their games, they won fairly handily. So I'm going to go with the 49ers. I say it's going to be a close game for a while. I think they'll pull it out. I'm going to go with maybe 27-21. What do you think?
Yeah, I was actually going to say 31-21.
Okay, no,
So
I'm
pretty
okay
close
with
there.
that.
Yeah, I think the 49ers will be able to get to 30 with that offense.
Okay, so 1989 San Francisco 49ers. And we'll say 31-21. All right, so we got our semifinals bracket side set in the NFC. The number 4 seed New York Giants will take on the number 3 seed San Francisco 49ers. So we're all set on that side of the bracket. Let's move over to the AFC, Nathan.
On the AFC side, we have the 1 seed 1972 Miami Dolphins facing off against the 4 seed 2004 New England Patriots. The 72 Dolphins, undefeated 14-0, first in the AFC East, coached by Don Shula, beat the Browns in the divisional round, beat the Steelers in the conference championship, and beat the Redskins 14-7 in the Super Bowl. The 04 Patriots were 14-2, first in the AFC East, coached by Bill Belichick. Beat the Colts in the divisional round, beat the Steelers in the conference championship, and they beat the Eagles 24-21 in the Super Bowl.
Okay.
All right.
I'll let you start this one, Joseph.
Okay, so I see these teams as pretty similar in terms of their makeup and stuff, even though they're 32 years apart here. So kind of the opposite of what we've been talking about in this episode as far as closest of years. But you got the Dolphins, who obviously went 17-0, and as we mentioned last episode, this Patriots team won 24 to 25 games between, I believe, 03, 04, and so I think set the record for most games won in a row with, what was it, 19, 18?
I believe so, something like that.
Across the 2 spans. So, both on long winning streaks in some form or fashion. You got coaching matchups. You call it kind of even. I think Belichick's probably a better coach, even though Shula's got more wins. But I could give you I could let you call that even there. I think Tom Brady gets the edge over Bob Greasy. Okay?
Or O'Morrow, yeah.
Yeah, or O'Morrow. Obviously you saw Bob Greasy play, but he seems more of a game manager type to me, as opposed to Brady. 72 Dolphins were first in the league in offense and defense, both points for and points and yards. Points for and points scored in yards. Patriots, let's see here.
7th and 9th. 7th in offense and yards, 9th on defense.
Right.
Yeah.
in points, offense fourth, defense second. So,
Right.
yeah.
And in rushing, I mean, the Patriots had Corey Dillon ran for 1,600 yards, but that was about it. I mean, he was their one guy.
Yeah.
Whereas the Dolphins had two guys, Kick and Zonka. Excuse me, Mercury Morris and Zonka both ran for 1,000 yards or more. And again, remember, we're looking at eras now. The Dolphins, Paul Warfield was their leading receiver with 29 receptions, but they didn't throw the ball much back then because the defenses were the rules were so much more liberal for defenses. But the Dolphins would just bludgeon you to death. I mean, they just ran the ball down your throat. And they had Paul Warfield, who was probably one of the best receivers of his time. Mm-hmm. Whereas the Patriots, they spread the ball around a lot. Givens had 56 catches. David Patton had 44 catches. Then you had Deion Branch, Daniel Ram, so forth and so on.
They didn't have a 1,000-yard receiver.
They did not have a 1,000-yard receiver. No. Whereas probably the Dolphins didn't either. When you look at if you look at their numbers. No, they didn't. Warfield had 606 yards for 29 receptions, but they just didn't throw the ball much.
Yeah.
I mean, the Dolphins ran for almost 3,000 yards that season in 14 games, whereas if you look at the Patriots ran for 2,134 yards in 16 games.
Right.
So, I mean, as good as, but again, we've got Bill Belichick. He's going to figure out a way to take something away, right? I mean, but the Dolphins had three things that you had to watch for. You had Zonka coming out of the backfield. He could catch the ball out of the backfield. He could run it. He had over 1,000 yards. Look at he only had 5 catches. Mercury Morris had 15. Jim Kick was the guy that they would put in there. He had 21 catches coming out of the backfield. I don't know. I mean, it's going to be tough. The Dolphins had a no-name defense.
Yeah, the Patriots had some good players in defense.
They did have some good players in defense.
Willie McGinnis, Ty Law. Let's see here. Vince Wilfork, a good defensive tackle for a long time. Santi Samuels, at time to shut down corner. Mm-hmm. You had Rodney Harrison, Teddy Bruschi, Mike Vrabel, Titans coach now. Mm-hmm. Some I guess obviously Sid no-name defense, some bigger names for the Patriots there who came together to have a pretty good defense.
They did,
led by Belichick. I think that if the Patriots' game plan is to take away the Dolphins' running attack, can Bob Greasy beat you in a game like that? I don't know.
I don't know.
I'm not sure.
I'm not sure. That's a really good question.
I think that on the other hand, I think it'd probably be easier to take Corey Dillon out of the game. And, all these Patriot teams never really had dominant running backs.
No, they didn't. No.
Corey Dillon did have a good year that year, but I think that Brady with all these receivers, some guys you probably never heard of that pop up and get catches, probably finds a way to get it done. I would say. But can't argue the fact that nobody beat the Dolphins in 72. So somebody couldn't get it done against them, obviously.
And if you look at the Patriots' offensive players, none of them were first-team All-Pro players.
Right.
If you look at the Miami Dolphins, look at their players. They had, let's see, rushing and receiving. They had Earl Morrall was a first-team All-Pro. If you look at their defense, Dick Anderson was first-team All-Pro. Bill Stanfield was first-team All-Pro. So, again,
in the kicking game, though, Vinatieri, right?
They did have Adam Vinatieri. That's right.
They give those to him, I think.
The Dolphins had Garo Upremian, who was their guy. Mm-hmm. Garo Upremian, again, he was only 65% on his field goals, and he had the infamous tried to pick up
right.
they can throw the ball.
That was him, yeah.
Yeah, that was Garo Upremian. They had Larry Seipel as a punter. They didn't average, he averaged 40 yards a punt. Dick Anderson punted a little bit. He averaged 37 yards a punt. So, yeah, you got to give the kicking edge to Vinatieri, but then again, the Dolphins didn't really have to kick it that much. I mean, they just never really had to do that. I mean, Upremian kicked 43 or 45 extra points. If you look at the Patriots, Vinatieri, 31 of 30, or excuse me, that was his field goals, 48 of 48 on his extra points. And Josh Miller was their punter, averaged about 42 yards a punt. So, yeah, if it came down to a field goal, I'd have to give it to Vinatieri.
And where seeding here? Where's this game at?
This game would be in Miami. The Dolphins were the number 1 seed.
Okay, so Patriots traditionally don't play well in Miami.
That's true.
Especially Tom Brady's Patriots.
That's true.
So the Dolphins have that going for them. It could be a 95-degree day down there.
It could be. Yeah, could be. And the Dolphins were, I mean, again, it's so hard to compare teams across eras like this, but the Dolphins were a very efficient, very good football team that was very hard, obviously very hard to beat. Nobody did beat them. So I don't know. I mean, what's your gut feeling on it?
Yeah. Maybe it's because I watched the Patriots this version of them a little more. I just don't see them losing this type of game.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. Belichick and Brady, they probably find a way to win somehow.
Yeah.
Take this for what it's worth. You could argue the Dolphins are due for a loss at some point. I mean, I don't know.
Yeah, it's hard to. It's very hard.
This might be one of the toughest matchups, not only in this bracket, but even the World Series bracket we've had, I think.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, and you look at the Patriots' record. They only lost 2 games, right? I mean, they lost to the Dolphins by 1 in Miami, and they lost to the Steelers by 14 in Pittsburgh. Yeah. But then turned around and beat the Steelers in the playoffs. Yeah. So yeah, I agree with you there. I think with Belichick as the coach, the Patriots were pretty much in their heyday right there. They were the defending Super Bowl champs. And as much as it's hard to say they would beat an undefeated team, I agree with you there. I think with Brady and Belichick, I think they find a way to win.
Yeah, I agree. Score.
What do you think?
Maybe like a 17-14. I don't know.
That's about right. I could go along with that.
It could come down to a Vinatieri field goal, possibly.
That's right. All right, so we'll say the New England Patriots will advance there, and we'll call it 17-14. All right, next matchup.
All right, next matchup, we have the 3-seed 1978 Pittsburgh Steelers against the 2-seed 1976 Raiders, 2 teams that played very often. Mm-hmm. The 78 Steelers were 14-2, first in the AFC Central, coached by Chuck Noll. Beat the Broncos in the divisional round of the playoffs. They beat the Houston Oilers in the championship, conference championship, and beat the Cowboys 35-31 in the Super Bowl. The 76 Raiders were 13-1, first in the AFC West, coached by John Madden. They beat the Patriots in the divisional round, beat the Steelers in the conference championship, and they beat the Vikings 32-14 in the Super Bowl. I'm interested to hear your thoughts on this one because, I feel like it could go either way, and it often did, right, when they played each other.
It often did, yeah. It often did. And I think Joseph made this point last time, in our last episode, when we were talking about these 2 teams, that, had it not been for the Steelers, the Raiders probably would have won more than 1 Super Bowl in the 70s, but the Steelers were the team that always seemed to get the best of them.
And I wonder if it not been for the Raiders, the Steelers could have won, 3 in a row or something, right?
Right.
Who got the best of who?
I was just going to mention that. The Steelers won the Super Bowl in 74. Yeah. They won the Super Bowl in 75. In 76, the Steelers started out 1-4. Okay? They had some injuries. They ended up winning 9 games straight to go 10-4 in 76. And their defense pitched 6 shutouts in that span. They got to the AFC Championship game against the Raiders, but they had Franco Harris hurt. Rocky Bleier was hurt, and obviously the Raiders won the game, even though it was close. So, I think at full strength, I think the Steelers might have actually won that AFC Championship game, and the Raiders may not have gotten to the Super Bowl.
So it's not so much the Raiders that were stopping them that time; it was just the injury. So it was more like the Steelers were the Raiders' kryptonite, not the other way around.
Yes, yeah, I agree with that. And not to take anything away from the Raiders. Don't get me wrong. I watched that team play, as I said many times, against the Bears in Soldier Field that year. They were a great football team. But I still think, had the Steelers been at full strength in that AFC Championship game, I think they would have gotten the better of the Raiders that day because they were just that much better of a team. And then when you look at rosters, like we were talking about, let's look at the defensive roster first of all. The Raiders had let's see here. They had no first team All Pro players on their defense. First team All Pro. You look at the Pittsburgh Steelers. Their defense, as soon as I get to it here, the defense had Jack Ham, they had Jack Lambert, and they had, I guess those 2 were the only 2 first-team All-Pros. So they had at least 2 first-team All-Pros on their defense, which But again, look at Hall of Famers on that defense. I mean, Joe Green, Jack Lambert, Jack Ham, Mel Blount. I mean, their defense was just unbelievable. I mean, they were 3rd overall in the league in defense. The Raiders were 18th overall in the league on defense that year, even though they did have a pretty solid defense. I think coaching matchup, I would give it to Chuck Noll. Even though Madden, I like John Madden, but I still would give the matchup to.
Which coach had the best video game franchise?
Well, then you'd have to give that to John Madden. Yeah,
the only coach of the video game.
Yeah. Okay. But
Can you imagine if everybody was playing Noel 2020 right now?
Weird.
Noel 2020.
Yeah. So I think looking at some of these individuals on offense, quarterbacks. I mean, I think Terry Bradshaw is a better quarterback, but for this season it was kind of a wash if you look at their numbers.
Right.
Right. Bradshaw threw 28 touchdowns. Stabler threw 27. Both pretty similar in yards. Bradshaw did throw a few more picks.
He threw 20 picks.
Right. Franco Harris, 1,082 yards. And then you have Mark Van Eggen.
Yeah, he had 1,000 yards.
1,000-yard season as well for the Raiders. I think the Steelers did have better receivers. The 1-2 punch with Swan and Stallworth.
They did.
But then again, Biletnikoff was a good receiver for the Raiders. And I think, let's see here. Biletnikoff didn't have 1,000 yards this season, but Cliff Branch did.
Right.
He had 11.
Right.
Casper, I forgot about Dave Casper.
The ghost, the galloping ghost.
The galloping ghost.
The ghost to the post.
Which one was his name?
He wasn't the galloping ghost, but you're thinking of the play that they won.
The ghost to the post.
The ghost to the post when they beat the Colts in the playoffs.
Somebody was called the galloping ghost, right?
Yeah, that was Red Grange, wasn't it?
I'm not sure.
So I guess go ahead.
No. Here, just I'm listening to what you're saying, and this is what pops into my mind. I think the Steelers' offense would eventually find a way to score enough points against the Raiders' defense. The Raiders' offense, I don't think, as good as they were that year, against that Steeler defense, I don't think could really make a big enough dent. So I think it would be an extremely close game, just as brutal as some of these games these guys played against each other in the 70s. But I just think that the Steelers' defense would hang in there a lot longer than the Raider defense would.
I agree with that.
If that makes any sense.
Yeah, it does. And that was a good point, too, of breaking down their matchup at 76 where, the Steelers had some injuries. They maybe weren't at full strength. And, look, anything can happen in one game, but part of the way you analyze it is more often than not what's going to happen. So
Correct.
I think more often than not, the Steelers, like you said,
right,
would come out victorious, and rely on their defense, I think.
Yeah, I think so, too. I think the Steelers win this game. I think it's going to be close, but I think they'll pull away at the end. Score-wise, I mean, I see it being a fairly close game, but I see the Steelers scoring, maybe I'm saying 24 points, and the Raiders maybe scoring 14 against the Steelers.
Yeah, I mean, and let's see here. I was looking at, let's see here. Yeah, so you got the Raiders, all their playoff games in the Super Bowl, over 30 points scored.
Right.
And then the Raiders, 24-24 and 32 in the playoffs. So, what did you say again for this?
24-14 Steelers.
Yeah, I don't see a problem with that. I think the Steelers get 20 points and still Curran defense clamps down on Ken Stabler and company.
All right, 24-14. We'll go with that. So, we have our semifinals set. On the AFC side, the 4th seed 2004 New England Patriots will take on the 3rd seed 1978 Pittsburgh Steelers. That game will be at Three River Stadium in Pittsburgh. On the NFC side, the number 4 seed 1986 New York Giants will take on the number 3 seed 1989 San Francisco 49ers. That game will be in Candlestick Park. So that'll be our next matchup. Make sure you interact with us. Remember, at PressBoxPod is our Twitter handle. I'm sure we'll have a poll up there for you as we get closer. Probably right now that we have our semifinal set, we'll have a poll up there just like we did for the World Series when we had our Final Four there. We're looking forward to the next round. We've got some really good matchups. I mean, it's going to be really hard to pick between these two games as you get closer and closer to the end of the bracket. So, Joseph, any final thoughts on on our going forward on our semifinal matchup?
Yeah, I'm looking forward to talking about the Patriots-Steelers matchup. You have, basically, I know Brady's now has won 6 Super Bowls, but Bradshaw won 4, which is no chop liver. So there's nothing to sneeze at, as our producer likes to point out, is one of our favorite sayings. You have Belichick versus Chuck Noll, another great coaching matchup. So that's what I'm looking forward to. And then on the other side of the NFC, another matchup where these versions of these teams kind of played each other.
Yes, they did.
99,
Yeah.
So we'll dig into that a little bit as well.
That's going to be, I think you just hit on a really good point. When you look at the 04 Patriots against the 78 Steelers, you're looking at different era teams there, okay? But if you look at the 86 Giants and the 89 49ers, those teams played against each other quite a bit. Mm-hmm. I mean, all those players were around in the 80s and had lots of matchups against each other. In fact, I remember back in '84 when the Giants were young and they were just starting this run that they had, which ultimately led to their Super Bowl in '86. They played the 49ers in the divisional round of the playoffs in '84 and gave the 49ers the toughest test they had that year. So the Giants and the 49ers had some really, really tough games with each other. So that should be a tremendous matchup.
I guess you can crown the 04 Patriots the greatest Super Bowl champion of the 21st century.
Yes, you can. That's very good because they're the only team left. That's exactly right. That's exactly, and I wouldn't have a problem with that. Really, when you think about the teams in the 21st century, I wouldn't have a problem with that. Yeah. As much as I don't like the Patriots, who would you say is better than them, right?
If you think about it, I guess since 04, there really hasn't been an all-time great Super Bowl champion team.
No.
And the top 2 or 3 of those have all been Patriot teams.
That's correct.
Pretty much.
Yeah. That's correct. Yeah, that's correct. I guess had the Patriots been fortunate enough to beat the Giants in 07, you might have said that was the greatest because they would have been undefeated. But they couldn't do it. Yeah.
Let's not forget the Ravens, Super Bowl 47.
Super Bowl. Yeah, that's true too. But
team that did not make this bracket. All right. So with that, we'll sign off on this episode and see you in the next one.
All right.